Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we will be focusing on the agricultural sector. Now, we are a nation of over 100 million citizens, and Egypt is trying to achieve and secure its resources for food, and we will be focusing on that tonight. But before we start doing that, let's check out a couple of the stories making the news today. And we'll start off with President Fattah al-Sisi, who held a phone call with the Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune. The two presidents exchanged congratulations and greetings on the occasion of the holy month of Ramadan, asking God Almighty to bestow His generosity on the brotherly Egyptian and Algerian people and the rest of the Arab and Islamic nations. President al-Sisi held a phone call with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. The two presidents exchanged greetings on the occasion of Ramadan. President al-Sisi emphasized Egypt's full support to Palestinians. President al-Sisi also held a phone call with the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The official spokesperson for the presidency of the Republic, Councillor Ahmed Fahmy, said the two leaders exchanged greetings on the occasion of the holy month of Ramadan. And earlier in the day, President Fattah al-Sisi held a phone call with the Kuwaiti Emir Sheikh Mish'al al-Ahmad al-Jabir al-Sabah. They both exchanged greetings over the start of the holy month. Also, President Fattah al-Sisi held a meeting with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and Minister of Planning and Economic Development Hala Saeed today. Presidential spokesperson Ahmed Fahmy said during the meeting, President al-Sisi was briefed on the developments of a number of files concerning the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development, including the most important features of the state's investment plans for the next fiscal year, 2024-2025. By implementing the plan, which primarily gives priority to developing the human resources, President al-Sisi directed to continue efforts aiming to expand investment in the Egyptian human resources, in addition to exploiting all available development opportunities to achieve the highest levels of investment returns to citizens. These were a couple of the stories making the news today, but now turning our attention to tonight's topic, let's check out this report regarding President Fattah al-Sisi actually meeting earlier last week with chief and head of the Food and Agricultural Organization at the United Nations, Ku Dong-yu, talking about the leaps that Egypt should be taking in terms of food security and the agricultural sector. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
President Fattah al-Sisi received on Sunday Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, Ku Dong-yu, and an accompanying delegation, during which they probed the global food crisis, particularly repercussions of the Russia-Ukraine war on Egypt, which is one of the largest grain importers in the world. Minister of Agriculture and Land Reclamation Saad Al-Qusseir attended the meeting, which focused on the long-term partnership between Egypt and the FAO. Such partnership was reflected in multiple development projects covering fields of agriculture and food, as well as signing a new country agreement between Egypt and the international organization for the period 2024 to 2027. The FAO chief expressed high estimation of the remarkable development of urban agriculture and industrial he saw during his visit, and stressed FAO's commitment to carry on with intensifying bilateral cooperation. He expressed keenness on deepening the current cooperation between Egypt and the organization with the aim of improving the Egyptian people's food security. That is why the two sides signed earlier in this week the 2024-2027 framework program, the Global food crisis, especially including the repercussions of the Russian-Ukrainian crisis on Egypt, was considered during the meeting, given that Egypt is one of the world's largest grain importers. In the course of the discussions, President Sisi expounded Egypt's endeavors to overcome this challenge through achieving a large increase in the total area of the cultivated land, in addition to vertical expansion via focusing on scientific and technological research to improve productivity. Also, in this context, the President highlighted the mega agricultural projects Egypt has been carrying out to achieve vertical and horizontal expansion in agricultural productivity, which led to start of production of hundreds of thousands of newly reclaimed areas, with a target of 4 million fedans to be approached in this year and the following one. For his part, the FAO Director General said the organization was closely following Egypt's experience in agricultural development and stressed keenness to deepen cooperation with Egypt in a way that supports Egypt's ambitious goal of improving food security for the Egyptian people.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're honored to be joined here tonight in the studio by Dr. Fattah Badr, the Professor of Genetics and Biodiversity at the Faculty of Science, Helwan University, and also the Rapporteur of the Environmental Research Council at the Academy of Scientific Research and Technology. Dr. Badr, always a pleasure having you with us here on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, sir.
It was a pleasure talking with you.
Always a pleasure, sir. Dr. Badr, now, first off, when we talk about achieving food security and really trying to increase the productivity of our agricultural sector, these are very nice and ambitious goals, and we are a nation that has surpassed 100 million citizens already, and we're going through a lot of regional crises, global crises. Obviously, what's happening in Russia and Ukraine 2 years ago really affected the whole world, including Egypt. How far do you feel we are in terms of achieving the goal of food security and really increasing the productivity level of our agricultural sector significantly, really?
You mean the main ways and means of achieving this?
How far are we from achieving this goal?
Well, we are working very hard to achieve this in the recent years, trying to expand the land reclamation in the west of the Delta, in Sinai, even in the south and the southwest of the country. And we're making success in this direction. We've also working on increasing the productivity by developing new cultivars, new varieties, new types of plants that are more productive than the usual or the normal cultivars. Of course, this has been done for tens of years, not only these days, but with the increasing of the human population in Egypt, there is a need to actually increase the land cultivated with crops, food crops, and also to increase the productivity of the major crops, the cereals, for example, wheat and maize for essential everyday food,
Yes.
and also other foods like legumes, fava beans and other legumes as well.
Yes.
With regard to fruits and vegetables, we have enough. We export fruits and vegetables.
Yes.
Not only now, but for also tens of years we export orange. And when I was in Europe for my PhD 40 years ago, we used to buy Egyptian orange from the markets in England.
Yes.
So I also see onion and other crops, Egyptian crops in Europe, for example. But this is not the essential food crops.
Yes.
The essentials are wheat and maize, and unfortunately we import wheat and maize. We need to expand the land cultivated with these major crops or probably basic crops for our food.
Well, a lot of observers are actually saying the main problem is not with our agricultural productivity. The problem is that we are exporting way too much, that we are not secure enough in terms of our main crops. I mean, Egypt is considered the largest grain importer as well.
Yes.
So how can we narrow this gap between the imports and the exports? I mean, yes, we do need to export because we do need the foreign currency and we need to have some sort of a balance of trade. But how can we actually narrow it down, and how much more do we need to really increase our agricultural productivity so as to not really feel the effect of exporting a lot of our products?
Exporting some agricultural products is also a means to buy this basic wheat and barley. But I agree to increase the land cultivated with wheat for the next 5 years, because our population is growing fast, and probably the wheat production in the world will not be sufficient for our imports. We, as you said, we are the major importers of wheat, particularly from Ukraine and Russia. You know the circumstances between these two countries. The prices have risen sharply last 2 years, and also when we cultivate our food in our land, so we feel more secure than waiting for the ships to come with the wheat. Probably if we increase the cultivated land, we can minimize the need for importing wheat and barley. Regarding the other crops, I think we are doing good in this. We export vegetables and fruits, as I said, and we have no problems in this. Of course, every country import food and export food. We are not the only country that imports wheat, but probably we import more because our population is growing faster. And probably we also think of addressing how we control the population growth as well. This is another side.
That's for another
episode. Yes.
Well, Dr. Badr, I mean, we just learned recently that Ukraine is getting back to pre-war levels of exporting their grain. So do we feel, are we having a bit more of a cushion in terms of now importing the grains from Ukraine? Are we feeling the difference now as opposed to 2 years ago when the Ukrainian-Russian conflict erupted?
Yeah, of course, it would be easier to... Ukraine itself needs to sell the grain. So we can get grain from Ukraine, or probably also from Russia, and other countries as well, sometimes Australia and sometimes the United States. We may also think of other ways of cultivating, in addition to cultivating some wheat, to increase our own production of bread, wheat bread.
Yes.
We can also make some agreements with other countries, like African countries, who have land, and we can actually cooperate with these lands by cultivating wheat in the south of Sudan, for example. We've been talking about this type of cooperation with countries like south of Sudan and Sudan and the other African countries, where they have land and have rain, but probably they don't have experience to cultivate it. That's another way to import our food, or probably not importing, but renting land in these countries and cultivating wheat for ourselves. That was also an idea that we've tried with Iraq some tens of years ago, but of course the relation with Iraq was not stable, and the project was not continued, not continuous. But again, we can try different means of securing our food without being dependent on Ukraine and Russia, or even Argentina and Australia, who are also wheat exporters. We can, as I said, try to cooperate in other ways, like cultivating in other countries with our farmers. We can, think of new types of cooperation that would reduce the cost of securing wheat for our population.
Well, early last week, President Sisi actually met with head of the Food and Agricultural Organization at the UN, Ku Dongyu, and Egypt signed an agreement with the FAO that really stems from 2024 to 2027. And they were talking about having and achieving great leaps in agricultural productivity and food security and everything. But what does such an agreement really entail? Because it's positive news, but a lot of experts are saying, well, when you sign these agreements with these organizations, sometimes they limit or put a certain criteria for the kind of crops you actually plant, the kind of crops you import, and to certain countries you need to export to them and import from them, and it would really benefit the organization as a whole and would be beneficial for the countries, but not as much as we would imagine. So what do such agreements entail really, be it with the FAO or the World Food Programme?
The Food and Agriculture Organization is a United Nations organization. So it represents, like the United Nations represents all countries. It tries to organize cooperation between countries as well, which is good for us, because we need to secure our food by making some agreements, whether with the FAO or with other countries as well. Probably if we accept the coordination of the Food and Agriculture Organization, that would be more secure to get our food for 5 years, like the agreement that has been signed when the head of the FAO was visiting Egypt. So this politically is more practical and secure than negotiating with different countries. But again, we can also negotiate with other countries who have surplus of food production, like Australia and like other countries, and we can get imports independent from the FAO as well. And again, we need to remember to increase our productivity, our own, and not only increase productivity of food, probably wheat and maize, but also to be careful in consumption of wheat. We normally consume more than we need. We should talk about this as well, because if you, on average, the Egyptian person eats more bread than other countries. So we need to control the consumption as well. Not to be careful with imports, but also to be careful with the consumption. We have more bread on the table when we leave after dinner or after fruit. We shouldn't do that. We should be more what we say,
have a more balanced
balance
diet,
on our food and our ways of having our food. It's not always good to eat so much. Sometimes eating more, little is better for your health than eating too much.
Yes. Well, what about the terms of such agreements? Is Egypt obliged by certain things, meeting certain standards, or having to? I mean, what are the sort of obligations Egypt need to abide by within the terms of such agreements?
With the FAO,
for instance.
Well, the FAO is good to have, as I said, coordination of FAO. But again, this is agreement with other countries.
Yes.
FAO as an organization does not produce anything, but it organizes production and export and imports. So with the FAO, we may get better prices, be sure of securing our food production. But that does not prevent negotiation with other countries if we can negotiate with other countries. And again, we need to cultivate more lands. We need to expand our cultivable lands as we do now in the west of the Delta and in other parts of the world. You know, I read some statistics before I came to the program, and since I was a child, we need Egypt has 6 million acres of cultivated land. We still have the same land for tens of years. Now we need to expand our land, especially when the population of Egypt no longer lives on the Delta and the Nile. We live in the west, in the desert. We live on the north coast. We live everywhere in Egypt now. The cultivated, the area where Egyptians live now in the country is not only 6% as we were learning at school. So we should actually increase our cultivated land. And if the new land is not suitable for wheat cultivation, we may cultivate other crops, and with these crops we export these vegetables or fruits or trees or oils, olives, for example. We used to cultivate olives in the north coast, and olive we can export olive and import some food for us. So expanding our cultivated land is now very important for food production.
Yes, but the concept of the expansion of agricultural lands has been around for decades, and everyone's been talking about horizontal expansion, vertical expansion, going to the western desert. But we've been talking about that for decades. And now we're talking seriously about actually carrying it out. We're talking now about cultivating an extra 4 million fidans. What's taking us so long? And we've been talking about, for instance, the new Delta and going to other areas as well, cultivating it for agricultural products and maybe even using it for industries as well. Why is it taking us so long?
Yes, because expanding cultivated land is not easy. It doesn't happen in 1 or few years, because lands are not. First, water is limited, so we have to calculate how much water we can use, and we know we have a specific amount of the River Nile, and we need to find underground water from other sources, or probably desalinization of seawater, which is very expensive. So our expansion in cultivation is limited by the water is very essential, and of course we can develop crops. Types of crops that use little water and increase the land. That happens, of course. It's not. It doesn't. I wouldn't imply that Egypt is not doing expansion. Egypt is doing expansion for tens of years, and in the last few years there is more expansion than before because the population now over 100. So expansion is a must now. And with new ways of irrigation, we can probably use the water we have for expansion by drip irrigation by dripping or other ways. And also there is some sensors who actually tell us how much water the plants need. So if we use smart agriculture, with this smart ways of agriculture, we can consume water and we can conserve water and use for cultivating more crops.
Yes.
And I think this would be a very important approach in the near future, because we wouldn't have rivers in the desert, but we will have water in tubes, and we will irrigate with the spraying or tripping. So the amount of water used for irrigation will be much less than the normal ways of irrigating in the river and in the river valley and the delta. This time will be gone. Even in the river and the delta, we now develop new ways of irrigating
Yes.
our crops. And also we use the underground water, because when we use the water goes down to the underground water. We can reuse this once again. And that has happened. The branches going to Sinai and the west of the delta is underground water is contributing to the cultivation of new lands. So the idea is there, and that the attempts to cultivate land with as water as possible is known to the government and the Ministry of Agriculture, and they are doing their best to expand. But again, it takes time, and it needs money as well, and probably the private sector may be brave to contribute to the cultivation, and the agriculture may be a way of profits. When the private sector do business in agriculture, they will profit, like in industry and other ways. We may probably stop importing and cultivate in our land.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was exactly what the Minister of Agriculture and Land Reclamation, Said Al-Qassair, actually spoke about, the Egyptian and the governmental efforts really to increase agricultural productivity and achieve food security. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Minister of Agriculture and Land Reclamation Said Al-Qassair said that Egypt spares no effort to achieve food security for citizens. The minister said the agricultural sector has witnessed an unprecedented leap that aimed at achieving a balanced development. He noted that Egypt has also achieved self-sufficiency in many crops, including vegetables, fruits, and others, with a surplus for exports. Minister Al-Qassair further added that Egypt has also managed to narrow the production gap for other crops, including wheat, corn, beans, and others, as per President Fattah al-Sisi's directives to increase agricultural productivity and expand agricultural output. He also said that there has also been a boom in agricultural exports, which exceeded 7 million tons of agro products in 2023. According to the minister, more than 3.5 million faddans have been reclaimed during the recent period, in addition to the implementation of 18 agricultural clusters in Sinai Peninsula. He revealed that nearly 40 billion pounds have been secured to rebuild fertilizer system in 3 years, in addition to activating the contract farming system in 8 agricultural crops for the first time, saying that contract farming usually allows farmers access to some form of credit to finance production inputs. The minister stressed that food security was linked to national security, noting that there had been an unprecedented agricultural renaissance under the rule of President Sisi, with a view to increasing the agricultural area to achieve food security for citizens. The minister also said that Toshki project is one of the most important projects currently underway and had the largest dates farm in the Middle East of his size in terms of palm numbers, and of the finest tigers, such as scheduled and recreational, as well as areas under import crops such as wheat, vegetables, salts, and mangoes. He noted that experience has shown that productivity in Toshki is high and promising, adding that the project confirmed the will, confidence, and ability of the state to manage large-scale projects, achieve success, remedy negatives, and correct the course of previously stalled projects. The Toshki project was a promising agricultural enterprise, and its agriculture must be followed by other projects such as livestock, seed production, and agro-manufacturing projects. There were also projects for the manufacture and use of livestock. The aim of the project was to create new societies, and the majority of its workers were from the level. The minister said that the main areas currently being worked on for development of agriculture sector were horizontal expansion, restoring of desert land, and the addition of new areas suitable for agriculture despite the challenges facing Egyptian state in the area of dearth.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Dr. Badr. Sir, now, whenever we spoke about the expansion and really increasing the agricultural productivity, it always comes down to how expensive it is. The new methods of irrigation, creating enough water resources for the land. So this begs the question about the role of the private sector within the agricultural business. Now, food is a matter of national security, and it's an existential, water is an existential issue for Egypt. So the public sector needs to have some sort of a say within the agricultural sector and the agricultural productivity. At the same time, the private sector needs to step in with their financial resources, with the expertise or imported know-how, and they need to pump a lot of money into the sector. And the private sector always thinks mainly about profit. But there needs to be some sort of a control, or at least some sort of a monitoring from the government. So how can you achieve the balance between the public sector's supervision on the whole agricultural industry and a strong and present involvement of the private sector?
Yes, the private sector contributes in all fields of life in Egypt now, and education, health, and now agriculture. Because cultivating new lands is expensive, and it takes some time. So the private sector should be part of this new approach of increasing our food production. And probably in the first few years, like any investment, you pay for investment. After some years you gain profits. And a very clever businessman would think, I'm sure they are clever, otherwise they will not be businessmen.
They'd be out of business.
But this is a promising, in my view, a promising field of investment, because in the long term they will be profitable, because they can actually, as a private sector, cultivate fruits and vegetables for export, which immediately gives some profits. And of course, the state has to control agriculture like it controls every other part of education and the health and others. But this control does not prevent the private sector of expanding as much land as possible. And to my knowledge, the land given to the businessmen who investigate in agriculture is given at much lower lower price than the price available in the market, because they encourage them to start at larger scale. So in some years, the value of the land itself will be have more value for the businessman as well. So agriculture, in my view, in the next few years, will be a profitable means of profit or investment in the agriculture center. We have a population who will consume. So you have the consumers available for your production, and probably they can only go to outside of the delta, because delta is a very long area owned by people who've been in the delta for thousands of years. But delta and the river valley is only 10% of the of Egypt, and we have 94% land in the west of the delta and Sinai, and then south of Egypt and the oasis, and these are open areas cultivated that have potential of agricultural development in the future. There of course are some attempts. When you go to the oasis, Siwa, for example, the army have land there, farms, big farms, and they are productive. And we know the army is a major producer of food in Egypt. But businessmen who have money, and probably there are other ways, of course. The state can encourage young people to go and arrange some ways of moving young people from the valley and the delta to the deserts and the oasis, and give them land and help them with some funding until they started their projects. I think there's something like this is another way of expanding our cultivated land. As much as we increase our land, and we will increase our food production, and when we increase food production, we will be more dependent on ourselves, and we gain more experience, and that would be good for our children and our future.
Well, the government is actually offering a lot of financial stimulus packages worth £100 billion to encourage the young investors and the young farmers as well to have their own business. The Central Bank of Egypt is offering lending at a preferential rates at £100 billion as well. So are these, I mean, the money's there, but and they are offering to the young investors and the young farmers. But what about the conditions? Are there stifling conditions to actually lend the actual money to the youth, to the young investors? Is it enough, or do we need more than £200 billion?
It's not the money, it's the encouragement to, and not to give the young people money and ask them to go and find land and cultivate it. But the land should be available, the supervision, the encourage, the experience from the Ministry of Agriculture, and there's agriculture guidance, something called the agriculture guidance for young people, how to cultivate, and be with them. And some of these young students may be graduates of agriculture colleges, but they never went to the field in the country, because they live in Cairo or so. And these the experience they gained from the college is not enough to cultivate crops. So they need more experience by the Minister of Agriculture. And I think the ministry have different programs, different approaches, and they are doing very well. But they need some more encouragement as well. We should show our appreciation for the efforts, so they can do more efforts. You know, we always critical of anything, but in this approach, I think the ministry have different approach for young people and for businessmen and for public expansion. And with the help of the army as well, we expand our land. But again, we need more encouragement, more investment from all
Yes.
sectors, from the businessmen, from the young students, young graduates or young people, and it will take some years before the profits is available.
Yes.
Now I'm following what's going on in the west of that. As you said, 4 million acres. In thousands of years, we have 6 million acres, and these 6 million have been constant for tens of years. Now, if we try to cultivate 4 more, and then that's about 70% increase in few years. That will make a difference, at least if we cultivate the major crops we need for our consumption. That would reduce the import of our food from abroad.
Dr. Badr, now you've mentioned a few of the challenges that lay ahead of increasing the agricultural productivity, be it climate change or scarcity of water or financial obstacles as well. And here comes the role of research and development, and you're, I mean, being a renowned researcher as well, how far do you feel we are, or the government is really encouraging and highlighting the importance and the efforts of researchers and research and development departments here in Egypt? Because sometimes the R&D department comes up with brilliant ways to increase agricultural productivity that would be beneficial for the country and for its food security, but at the same time, private sector investors who have a bigger share of the market would actually try to dampen their hopes and their researchers and their findings of ways to increase productivity. So how can we actually make use of the R&D findings and also make sure the government protects them and endorses them and keep maybe private sector monopolizers at bay?
It's the role of the government, whether the Minister of Agriculture or the Academy of Science or the research institutes or the universities, to find new ways of increasing agricultural productivity, especially in the agricultural colleges and some science colleges and institutes. And the government and the Academy of Sciences actually supporting new ideas for producing climate change resilient crops. This has been a major topic in the field of research in the agriculture for some years. Since we started feeling the climate change and talking about climate change, because climate change is happening, whether we like it or not. So we need to be prepared to develop types of crops that's more resilient to climate change. And the resilience means are more able to stand heat, temperature, drought, and of course drought means less water. And there is many programs, many projects from the Ministry of Agriculture, from the Academy of Science, for scientists to develop new cultivars. As always, the science in the lab is different from the science in the field. It takes some years to transfer the results of research from the lab to the field. Probably the businessman can contribute to this as well by encouraging contribute to the costs of adapting the results in experiments in the field, in the practical lab.
Ladies and gentlemen, definitely great news for Egypt's population really trying to secure its sources of food and increase the agricultural productivity, signing this agreement with the Food and Agricultural Organization at the UN is one step closer during very difficult times and times of regional conflict. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my honorable guest, Dr. Fattah Badr, the Professor of Genetics and Biodiversity at the Faculty of Science at Helwani University, and also the Rapporteur of the Environmental Research Council at the Academy of Scientific Research and Technology. Dr. Badr, always a pleasure having you with us on the show.
Thank you again for you.
Thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you for having me again.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Night International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.